Welcome to the Terrible Podcast with your hosts from SteelersDepot.com, where you can find all your latest and greatest Steelers news. It's Dave Bryan and Alex Kozora, always lit, talking Steelers. And now, here's Dave and Alex.
Welcome to the Terrible Podcast, Season 16, Episode 137. He's Dave Bryan. I'm Alex Kozora, SteelersDepot.com. Thanks for being back with us this Monday, Steelers Nation. And Dave, our long national nightmare is over. Aaron Rodgers is officially back in Pittsburgh, although for some who don't want Rodgers to return, that nightmare may just be beginning. But Rodgers officially signing his contract, or at least agreeing to terms, Saturday night is when that news broke. He was in the building today, presumably to take a physical and or officially put pen to paper. We have rough contract details. Pittsburgh, of course, beginning their voluntary OTAs today. So Rodgers ultimately signs about 2 weeks earlier than 2025, right before mandatory minicamp in early June last year, right before voluntary minicamp this year. But in many ways, the offseason played out in identical ways. And so Rodgers is back. Dave, as you like to say, react to me.
Yeah, I can tell by the excitement in your voice, man. You're pumped up.
We're all just a little tired, and at least there's an answer.
And you stole my quote there. Our long national nightmare is over. Do you remember who said that?
I don't think I do. It's too early on a Monday for me to think back. You tell me.
That was Gerald Ford after the whole Watergate scandal with Richard Nixon and Nixon stepping down as president, and all like that. But that's the root of that. And I know that because I watched a few more documentaries over the weekend and all like that. And I think watching the Netflix fairly new one. I think it was a 5-parter on Vietnam. And for those that don't know, I'm enthralled with anything Vietnam and World War II to watch anything I can get my hands on and all like that. But I saw that clip over the weekend as well too. And now that this is all done with Aaron Rodgers, is our long national nightmare really over at this point? I know a lot of people. We are moving on from the national media talk of will Aaron Rodgers re-sign with the Steelers, and is it the right move, to Aaron Rodgers is now re-signing with the Steelers, and is it the right move? Phase of the offseason. So if you thought any of this, if you thought this is coming to an end, it's not. We got all this time still for the rest of the summer to talk about the whole Aaron Rodgers thing. To me, it's all nauseating right now. In fact, let's start with I guess what Jerry Dulac put out on Twitter about, 30 minutes or so. Aaron Rodgers is at the Steelers facility this morning to sign his contract. Not certain and probably not likely he will participate in first day of OTAs. So obviously all eyes now turn to OTAs, which, hey, hooray, football in short season is really officially here at this point. Good on that. People, I'm sure, won't hyper focus on whether or not Aaron Rodgers participates in day 1 or day 2 or day 3 of the first OTA sessions. Here's the gigantic takeaway. The takeaway that gets me the big money here. Aaron Rodgers is back. He's signing the contract today. He's there for the start of OTAs. To me, that's it. That's the story. And thank you for listening to the Terrible Podcast.
Okay, I guess we'll wrap it up
with Dave and I. I mean, that I don't know. I was kind of over the weekend thinking, man, what's going to make a great show for the Monday show on the heels of this Aaron Rodgers decision and all. And what do the listeners really want us to talk about, I guess, at this point when it comes to Aaron Rodgers? I know we could go down a little bit deeper and say, and we will, what does the rest of the depth chart look like? How's that going to shake out and all like that? But I mean, we've talked about of this, and there can't be anybody listening to this show for the last several months and since last season ended that in their right mind didn't think that this was the most likely and probable outcome when it comes to the quarterback position, at least quarterback number one spot, really all off season here. Now you can get into the is this right, is it wrong thing, and that those talks obviously will continue here. But the fact of the matter is, we are really right now right where probably most should have imagined this team would have been, outside of maybe going into the offseason of wondering, will the Steelers draft another quarterback? And obviously we've gotten through all that. We know that they have. Will Aaron Rodgers indeed be there? Even though a lot of people expected him to be back, will he indeed be there for the start of OTAs? He is. I guess the big question is where do we go from here?
You're right that we've covered already so much ground related to Rodgers. This felt inevitable, especially in recent weeks, that this was going to happen. He was going to sign. So I guess the question is, where does Pittsburgh go from here? I wrote an article this morning detailing that this Rodgers offseason saga played out pretty much the same as last year, even though Omar Khan and Art Rooney swore it would be different and much quicker. It wouldn't be dragging on and on. And it really did. Now, Rodgers did sign about 2 weeks sooner than 2025, but for all intents and purposes, it was basically an identical offseason of speculation and waiting and goalpost shifting and conspiracy theories of when Rodgers would make some sort of grand reveal, which never happened, and then finally him signing before minicamp. Um, my point was, despite the offseason being the same, the regular season must be different. And you got to get over this hump and win a playoff game. And you bring back a 42 and soon to be 43-year-old quarterback in Aaron Rodgers to win now and to win a playoff game with a roster that on paper does look better than a year ago, with his former head coach, with an offense that should be more potent than it has been just based on McCarthy's background and some of the upgrades that Pittsburgh has made. And so for all the similarities of last year's offseason saga and this year's offseason saga, the results must be different.
Exactly. I agree with that. Does all of the noise leading up to this of when there's still all this talk about, has Aaron been in town for the last 2 weeks? Did he just get in the other day? Has he been here for about at least a week? Obviously you had the kid, the Brogan kid, and kudos to him for beating everybody to the punch of the spotting Aaron Rodgers out with a couple of the teammates there at the ice cream shop and all like that. I see Get Up this morning talking about, does this mean some sort of, what is a relationship between Aaron Rodgers and Mike McCarthy at this point? Has there been contention? Is things softening now? I does any of what matters right now, Alex? What is the big thing that matters on on May 18th, 2026? What matters right now?
I mean, in terms of what actually matters and all of that, as you're getting at, is just media talking points, and right or wrong, it doesn't really matter. I think what matters is Rodgers, there's some finality. Pittsburgh now has clarity on their starting quarterback, which is always critical, even though we assumed and believed and expected this to be the outcome. Just it's different whenever it's officially happening. The fact that Rodgers, I assume, will at least be at practice today, even though he may not participate per the Dulac report. That was like last year whenever he showed up to mandatory minicamp, Tomlin held him out of the team drills. And so that may be a similar thing here to give the other guys some reps. But for Rodgers to be around the quarterbacks, to be around Will Howard and Drew Aller, and to be around a young receiver like Jeremy Bernard is a good starting point to get familiar, to get to know your teammates a bit better, to hopefully start building a relationship and chemistry that will hopefully pay off come the regular season. So what matters is is finality for the team internally, and for some of these young guys to be around their starting quarterback for the season.
Right. I agree. It is what it is at this point, and now you're going to have to look. At least he is there for the start of OTAs, and obviously got a new head coach, which is obviously not new to Aaron Rodgers, but you've got some new pieces in there, and that they're going to try to compete with Aaron Rodgers as their starting quarterback here moving forward. I just look. We can go back and we can talk about, look, is this the way that deep down as a fan side of me wanted it to go? If it was, if I would have had my way, Aaron Rodgers would have retired, and the Steelers would have pressed on, been forced to maybe go either a different direction with a different veteran quarterback. Who knows? Malik Willis. I don't know. There wasn't a lot of really options out there, regardless of how you look at this thing overall, as far as starting quarterbacks that would have given you probably more of a potential to give to maybe make a Super Bowl run, or at least win a playoff run this year. I came to the conclusion very quickly that my wants were going to end up not meaning a damn, that Aaron Rodgers.
They were not considered by the
No,
Steelers,
no,
clearly.
no. Imagine that. So here we are. Now look, I don't know. We'll talk about the contract here in a minute, but I guess where my mind goes at this point is, what is the best worst case scenario for the 2026 Steelers right now, if that makes sense?
I'm trying to parse the language there a little bit. I mean, I guess the answer would be more of the same: a 9-8, 10-7 season, make the playoffs, get bounced one and done. That's not what you're looking for, obviously, but in terms of a best worst case to try to walk that line of what you mean, I suppose that would be the answer of just another season like last year.
All right. Would the best of the worst case scenario, would the best worst case scenario include maybe them getting to that point with Aaron Rodgers maybe missing a couple of games, so at least you get one of these young quarterbacks on the field to some degree?
Yeah, I guess you can look at it from that angle of, is there a way where Rodgers plays, you can still make the playoffs, and you still get to evaluate these young quarterbacks a bit, have some sort of a knowledge base on them as you make your 2027 decisions? Yes, but it's always hard to sit there and say you want your starting quarterback to get hurt, because
Right.
obviously that just impacts your chances in general. It makes for a much less fun season in most cases.
Right. And I don't know how many people are excited, and we'll obviously get into the conversation of what is this, you know, what's the quarterback room going to shake out as? Is Mason Rudolph out? Is Will Howard out? You got a lot of time to worry about that and talk about that. And as I often like to say, these things have a funny way of working themselves out. But what if they don't work themselves out, other than it coming down to a decision? Personally, I would, even though I'm not a huge fan of it, and have talked about, well, I can't imagine this team going into the season with Aaron Rodgers backed up by two quarterbacks who haven't played one snap in regular season play. Personally, I am rooting for that to happen at this point, because of the potential, I guess, probability of at some point one of those kids being forced into a game to take some snaps, to at least give you something on the field in meaningful football to take a look at here. But I keep rolling back to, we are really where we kind of imagined this team would have ended up being at this time of the offseason. Maybe a little bit more positive that at least Aaron Rodgers is there for day one. And then now, we just got to look ahead and see, what this team can actually accomplish overall, and what ends up being, what's the best case scenario and what maybe is the best worst case scenario, if all that makes sense. Because
Well,
I look, neither one of us expect this team to make a playoff run and go deep into the playoffs, right? And regardless of who would have been at quarterback this year.
Well, I don't treat them as Super Bowl contenders, but Can they get to the playoffs? Yes. Could they win a playoff game? I'll still say yes, they could. They need to show it. We've had this song and dance before, but if you can do both those things, you're one of the final four teams left in the AFC. Let it ride at that point. So that's kind of my stance of where this team sits. But I've not spent a lot of time thinking about and dialing in my exact expectations. I usually wait for that to happen right before the start of the season with the hay in the barn. You go
Right.
through training camp, see the rookies, new pieces, injuries, et cetera, et cetera. Let me ask you or kind of frame it this way. You mentioned kind of the next questions that come off of the Rodgers signing. And as you said, who is odd man out in the quarterback room? I think both of our stances have basically been let's wait and see. We can make some assumptions and predictions right now. We know that a lot could change from mid May until late August when those decisions have to be made at roster cutdowns. And while it's fair and I think easy to sit there and say Mason Rudolph is the odd man out, you never know what happens. We saw Will Howard get hurt last year. Maybe an injury happens this year that changes the landscape and complexion of that quarterback room. You hope that everyone stays healthy, but injuries are part of the game. And so that's kind of my mindset of there's no need to make that decision now. The Steelers certainly are not making that decision today. They always go with four quarterbacks. They'll have four quarterbacks. They can get some of those guys reps, and you kind of go from there. Is kind of my philosophy on the quarterback situation.
Right, but people, for the most part, that listen to this show don't like us to take the kind of, I guess, the passive. Let's wait and see how it plays out. They want hard predictions or conviction, I guess, in which way that we think that it will go. And I'm seeing more and more people at this point, at least the major media and beat writers and all that are trying or at least thinking that Mason Rudolph's going to be number two, and this does not bode well in a healthy world for Will Howard. And people are talking about, well, you can get him to the practice squad and all like that. My my hope is at this point, and especially based only on what everything Mike McCarthy has said since day one since he's been hired, is that and even going by Mike McCarthy's history, and a lot of people are saying, "Oh, there's no way Mike McCarthy would keep two essential rookie quarterbacks behind a veteran quarterback." That unequivocally is wrong, right?
Because I wrote about this a couple of weeks ago, and it was May 2nd. I'll pull it up here. Where Pittsburgh and McCarthy have had seasons where they've had these young, inexperienced backups. Pittsburgh in 2018, 2019, I think it was. And you had Dobbs and Rudolph as the backups. And I'm just trying to get my dates right here. It was 2018 or 2019. I can't quite remember in terms of that. 19 is whenever Dobbs got traded to Jacksonville. But I think it was 18. It was Dobbs and Rudolph as the backups there, where Rudolph was a rookie. Dobbs was a second-year guy who barely played his rookie season. With McCarthy, it was 2008. Rodgers, the starter. Flynn, Brom, the backups, both rookies. 2012, Graham Harrell as the backup to Rodgers. 2016, Brent Hundley was the backup to Rodgers, and he had very little experience. And then Dallas in 2021, Dak was the starter. Cooper Rush was the backup. Now, Rush had been in the league for a couple of years, but really had no regular season action. So, all of that to say is it's certainly possible, and there's history that says they could go into the year with these inexperienced quarterbacks backing up Aaron Rodgers.
Do you owe it to your veteran guys under contract, guys like Cam Hayward, T.J. Watt, I guess Alex Highsmith to some degree, Jalen Ramsey, and obviously most notably on the defensive side of football? Do you owe it to those guys to not only return a veteran quarterback, in Aaron Rodgers, but to also consider going into the season with a more veteran backup in Mason Rudolph?
I mean, you owe it just to build the best roster possible. That's got to be the focus. And obviously, it's a team that still wants to win now. It's a big reason why they're running it back with Aaron Rodgers, and they want to maximize the window of Hayward and Watt, et cetera. These guys without playoff victories and guys who are, getting older in their careers. But I don't think you make your decision on the backup quarterback based on what's serving Cam Hayward best or TJ Watt best. And we talk about these things theoretically, but we're going to have a lot of information by the time these decisions need to actually get made. We'll get to watch Will Howard, health willing, for the entire preseason. And if he looks in over his head and not ready, then that probably tells you should find a way to keep Mason Rudolph. But if Howard goes out there and lights it up and looks really good, then you're going to have more confidence in him being the number two. So again, it is the boring answer to give. I'd love to give you the hot take of this is exactly what's going to happen. I know that Rudolph certainly feels like odd man out, and that's my prediction, I guess, as of now. I mentioned a trade candidate. Tampa Bay makes a ton of sense if they do want to shop him. But we're going to go through the whole summer. We're going to watch these guys every single day in training camp, all 3 preseason games, evaluate the totality of that process, and then make those decisions whenever the time comes in late August.
All right, and I take exception to the fact that just stash this guy on IR even though he's not injured. I think that makes for great print and all like that. But I mean, how many times does that really happen where a guy's not injured that he ends up on IR? Now,
I mean, it happened to Logan Lee a couple of years ago. It's not whether they are injured. It's just a minor injury that
right.
probably wouldn't require an IR stint, but sometimes you make it work of like, hey, this is how you're going to stick around, either IR or we're going to cut you.
All right. So I suppose we can watch for every little hangnail or whatnot throughout the rest of the preseason or rest of the off-season practices, training camp into the preseason and all. But
but his last year showed like Howard was legitimately hurt and had to go to IR,
exactly.
and that could happen. You never know.
Exactly. My hope is, and really my thought is that even in a perfectly healthy quarterback room this offseason, and it's no slight really against Mason Rudolph. I just think you've got these young quarterbacks on the roster, and you never know what's going to happen with the quarterback class next year. Is unless Will Howard just really stinks it up, every consideration should be given or to keeping the 2 young guys behind Aaron Rodgers at this point.
I still will contend, and I'm going to be super annoying about it this offseason, that I will not close the door on the idea of keeping all 4 quarterbacks. I know that's unusual and extreme, and it's not making your roster the most efficient in terms of maximizing game day hats and guys who can help you win, but I think that's still a scenario that is at least possible depending on how the offseason shakes out.
All right, that will be quite interesting the closer we get to the start of the regular season, if indeed these 4 stay healthy and if all 4 are competing the way you'd like to see them compete and having the preseasons and look, I mean, you only got 3 preseason games too. I keep going back to, damn it, and this is at some point probably going to go down to 2 preseason games but you've got to, assuming both Aller and Howard are healthy and able to get on the field in preseason, you've got to give those 2 guys as much work as possible, right?
Sure, and they're going to get plenty of it. We saw that Aller, or am I saying it right? I know somebody corrected me on the pronunciation of him, so I'm working on that. I got to get it retrain myself to say his last name correctly. But we saw him as the only quarterback in rookie minicamp and get all those reps, and so McCarthy throwing him into the deep end early, and I expect that to continue with those guys getting a ton of reps in the preseason.
I mean, once again, we talk about 65 offensive snaps during a preseason game on average. You talk about 130. You're talking at most maybe 200 offensive snaps during a preseason here. You're probably not going to put Aaron Rodgers out there for any of them. And if you do, it's probably only going to be about 3 or 4 or 5, maybe at max. How much do you have to see Mason Rudolph out there? And can you end up getting, both these 2 younger quarterbacks, at least like 75 snaps a piece?
Yeah, you're going to give those guys plenty, I'm sure, to evaluate. And then in training camp, you can handle those snaps a bit better and structure those snaps in a more controlled environment. So, we'll see, but I expect those guys to play plenty, assuming good health.
All right, and then hyper focusing on Will Howard here. It is important to remember that he was a 6th-round draft pick, even though Mike McCarthy said I would have taken him early and yada yada. At this point, 6th-round quarterbacks, and it a lot of times it takes special circumstances for those guys to even see meaningful snaps across the NFL landscape forever and a day, right? I mean, we would not know Tom Brady. Would Tom Brady have become Tom Brady if not for the Bledsoe injury and the things that had happened on their roster early on in his career? Tom Brady very easily could have just become a footnote in his, as far as draft history goes. And look, you fast forward to the things with Purdy and San Francisco. Sure, there are instances where those guys end up finally getting chances. But here's the thing, too: if should the opportunity arise that Will Howard does see meaningful snaps, i.e., in 2026, he damn sure better make the most of them, right? Because
Sure.
the windows for those guys, especially with 1 year later, this team's investing a 3rd-round draft pick in Drew Aller, or Aller. I'm not going to get into the semantics there.
Aller, I think
Aller,
is what
okay.
I'm working towards.
But the fact of the matter is the higher drafted quarterback usually gets the most attention, and especially one that's drafted within the first 3 rounds, because of the likelihood of him needing to at least likely staying on your roster the longest amount of time there. So when and if, I mean, that, and this includes training camp and a preseason as well too, Howard really needs to make the most of all of his opportunities from this point forward, starting today, day 1 of OTAs 2026, because the window of opportunity, just for the obvious type reasons, just isn't there for guys like him.
Dave, I wanted to also ask you kind of in the next steps of just questions about where Pittsburgh goes from here. I posed the question this morning: is Rodgers' return good or bad for Will Howard and Drew Aller? And I want to get your take on, is it good for both? Is it bad for both? Is it good for one, bad for one? Obviously, there's pros and cons to Rodgers returning. It's not black and white where it's all good or all bad, but what would your take be?
I mean, I think it's good overall. I mean, you have a veteran quarterback that's been around as long as he's had, that obviously you would think is going to out of the chute, understand, even with the new head coach in Mike McCarthy, because he's worked with him before, going to be able to translate things real easily to these guys, and hopefully and help them both pick it up real quick. And throughout the process of time in the quarterback room, throughout the remainder of the offseason, as they go through practice film and showing him what he saw and what he was looking for. Yeah, I don't think there's anything wrong with having any established veteran in a quarterback room, and I think to some degree Mason Rudolph will be able to help those kids as well too. I think it was great to hear all the positive things that Aaron Rodgers had to say about Will Howard last year. Those two seemed to be BFFs to some degree. I would hope that Aller, and Rodgers have a similar type relationship here. So at its core, yeah, I think it's fine to have a guy like even someone that with kind of the, I don't want to say attitude, but the character and the makeup of Aaron Rodgers. I think that he's shown that he can work with younger quarterbacks in the past, and I think just last year with Will Howard is a testament to that. So I don't find anything wrong with it. I think it's a good thing at its core. Yes.
There's no question Rodgers will be a good mentor and teammate, and the narratives against that have all, I think, been proven terribly wrong. We know that whenever Rodgers first came in the NFL, Brett Favre was not welcoming to him because he was the guy who would eventually take his job, which is what happened. And Rodgers did not want to be that guy whenever he became the older statesman. So there's certainly a lot of value in that. I think it's great for Aller in particular to learn the way that Howard did last year. I don't know if overall it's good for Will Howard, though, because this might be Will Howard's best chance to be a starting quarterback for the Pittsburgh Steelers, and one that's now obviously blocked by Aaron Rodgers. What will it look like in 2027 with Aller in his second year, potential first-round rookie quarterback on the roster? This might have been Howard's best chance to compete for that starting job out of the gate. And so my answer was kind of split, where I think it's good for Aller. There was obviously benefit for Howard, but I think ultimately it would have been more ideal for Howard in his career had Rodgers retired.
Or this team not draft Aller.
Yes, but even then, Howard's still not starting this year in terms of competing for that role. It may create a little more clarity for next year, but this I think would have been Howard's best chance to start. He could be in the mix next year, but that path may be tougher because Aller I don't think would have really been given a chance to start out of the gate this year had Rodgers retired. Had it would have been Rudolph and Howard battling, and Howard would still have to earn that job. He wouldn't be given it, but I think this would have been his best chance.
All right. Well, I mean, we don't have a crystal ball to see what happens past this season and all, but let's assume, for whatever reason, Will Howard winds up on another roster in 2027, but yet he was able to hang around the Steelers in I'm not even going to go to practice squad route yet. I'm going to open it up as at least a plausible route for him. But let's assume that Howard is at worst a practice squad quarterback for the Steelers in 2026. So he's still sitting in all the meetings and all like that. And who knows where his career goes from there. He might look back on it for whatever chance or two that he ends up getting with another team of being grateful for having all that time with Aaron Rodgers. So at its core, no, I mean, yeah, short term as far as potential for getting meaningful playing time in 2026, could it wind up being detrimental? But they call them NFL careers for a reason. So how will this impact what Will Howard's hoping will at least be more than just a 2 or 3 year, 4-year NFL career moving forward? And how valuable will the time being spent with Aaron Rodgers help benefit him in that?
There's certainly value in that, and as you said, Rodgers, who can translate the McCarthy offense, will only help both of those guys. But you gotta play at some point. I know it's only year 2 for the guy, but this might be his best chance to have this might have been his best chance to have that path for playing time. That's just the point that I wanted to make. But obviously it's out of their control. It is what it is. Rodgers is back. Howard will still compete for the number 2 spot, or he could, he's one snap away from playing should he become the immediate backup, and that's the focus now.
All right, let's talk a little bit now more about this Aaron Rodgers contract. All right.
Okay.
According to reports, Aaron Rodgers' 1-year deal with the Steelers includes $22 million guaranteed, and he can make up to $25 million with incentives there. I think the main takeaway here that we've talked about for throughout this process here is fair market value or realistic potential value for Aaron Rodgers, what he would potentially get from the Steelers. And we kept going to ever since Malik Willis was signed by the Dolphins with his average yearly value of coming in at $22.5 million. That seemed to be kind of about the line that we were potentially going to be dealing with here with Aaron Rodgers. This is obviously roughly $7 million more than the unrestricted free agent tender of 15 and some change million that they placed on Aaron Rodgers a couple of weeks ago there. Personally, I have the real value of Aaron Rodgers probably coming in around the 19 million or so mark. So if we're talking about 22 million guaranteed with him, we could split the atom here and save a couple of nickels and dollars here and there. This was about the most realistic aspect of what this contract was likely to end up being, right around the Malik Willis number, right?
Well, I just think back to what you had said a couple of podcasts ago and I forget, I don't want to misquote you, so correct me if I'm a little off in repeating this back, but you had said if they paid him more than $17 million per year, it would be irresponsible, and he's going to get a base salary of at least 22 to 23 million and sent us up to 25, so well past 17. So do you view this deal as irresponsible?
I do.
Okay. And you base that on what?
I base it on what I think his market value is, and I do worry at this point. Uh, is is the extra money now? Will it prevent them pulling the plug on him at some point?
I mean, if it's 17 or 20 or 25, I think it's all pretty much the same. My point, why I don't really consider.
I felt he was painted into a corner, and that the Steelers had the bargaining aspect with him, and because I viewed his max value, at least from what I have seen as far as play goes, and not using comparative of just because Malik Willis, who has barely played any snaps, realistically, meaningful snaps and good meaningful snaps in the NFL, throwing the comparatives out just because of flat out. That's what the last guy at the you know bottom of the uh, meaningful list got. I still viewed his base value, or what I viewed as being his base value, as being around 17 million, with maybe a max of being around 19 million. So I do. And they had him painted in a corner. It was going to be Pittsburgh or nowhere for quite a while. So do I view it as an overpay? Yeah, but if that's what it took to get done, that's what it took to get done. And am I going to lose a lot of sleep over what, 17 to 22, 5 million, I guess, right? Am I going to lose a lot of sleep over that? No. But I view it as more of an irresponsible, and maybe taking potential money from 2027 just to suffice a guy who's made a lot of money in the league to be on par or just slightly more than Malik Willis. I do take that as kind of irresponsible.
He's now the highest paid player in NFL history. That may change if Matthew Stafford gets a rework deal this summer. I know the Rams have been working on that again, but Rodgers is now in first place, over 400 million in career earnings of what he'll ultimately earn when this year is all said and done.
Now, I still thought there should have been incentives in there, obviously, that would have gave him the ability to earn more than 17 million. I think you could have made those a little bit more friendly, maybe to his side, when you split the atom between likely to be earned and not likely to be earned. But I would have, to me, I have his value at 17 million based on the tape.
The contract's a little more than what I thought it was. I never spent a lot of great time thinking about exactly what the contract would be. I didn't think it was a big hang-up. I still don't believe that it was. And Jerry Dulac also reporting just moments ago that Pittsburgh and Rodgers had agreed to the quote parameters of a financial agreement well over a month ago in terms of what the contract would look like. I don't know if all the T's were crossed and I's dotted back then, but Dulac is adamant the contract was never a real sticking point. To your point, I don't think either side viewed it as trying to paint the other in a corner. I don't think Pittsburgh wanted to paint Rodgers in a corner and exert leverage in terms of we're the only game in town, because Rodgers could have retired. And Pittsburgh, frankly, wanted and needed and planned for Rodgers to return. And they did not want him to walk off into the sunset. They wanted him back. And I don't think Rodgers was trying to needle Pittsburgh too much either. So they gave a deal that was above Malik Willis and reflected on what Pittsburgh thought was a good season in Pittsburgh. Others can disagree, but Pittsburgh was happy with the job that Rodgers did, and that kind of probably brought up his value more. Even though it is a little more than what I thought it would be, the reason why I'm not really concerned by that is it's a one-year contract. It's not preventing Pittsburgh from doing anything else. It's not like this is preventing them from making a free agent splash or going out to sign somebody. There's a salary cap component to it. We could argue trading for a player at the deadline or something like that. But, overall, it's not really impacting Pittsburgh's cap situation or tying them down and being unable to make more moves. They're going to still be able to do that. We're going to talk about restructuring contracts here soon. They're in a fine place cap-wise, it's a 1-year contract. He's off the books next year, and you're going to have a lot of cap space then. So from that standpoint, it doesn't really impact anything going forward in my mind, and so the contract being a little above expectation is okay by me.
I mean, is this going to make a difference in games that they win this year? No. We're quibbling. I'm quibbling over 5 million. I just thought that his real value, should have been less than that. And look, we talked since Malik Willis signed the contract. We kind of knew that that might be a measuring stick of some sort when it came to Aaron Rodgers. And would the guaranteed money? We knew that he would be given the opportunity, likely with the incentives, to earn more than he was able to earn last season, which was like 19.5 million. You just did. I did kind of wonder what that actual number. How much more, how much less it would have came in under the Malik Willis number. But once again, in the grand scheme of things, is this a big discussion point? No. Nerds like me like to hyper focus on uh, player value and future cap money and impact and cash and all like that. But the fact of the matter is, 5 million is not worth getting all that upset about. Now, I do wonder though, do you if this thing does get off to a rocky start, specifically with Aaron Rodgers' play overall, obviously if you're winning, you're not going to bench Aaron Rodgers. But what if you are not winning and Aaron Rodgers is not playing well by the time we get to coming back from the Paris game and around bye week time? Will they will will the price that they're paying Aaron Rodgers play into how quickly maybe this team decides to pull the plug if they need
No,
to?
no, because whether he was gonna get paid a 17 million base salary or 22 million, it's still, good money. It's not a cheap Russell Wilson 1 year for the minimum contract where it's as little as you can pay for the guy. And when it's Rodgers, it's not even about the money. It's about the pride. It's about his resume, the relationship with Mike McCarthy. All those things I think matter more. I who knows how the season will go. It's so hard to look into that crystal ball. And if Pittsburgh is struggling at that point, why are they struggling? How did Howard look in the preseason? All that kind of stuff. But I wouldn't expect any sort of plug pulling to occur if it happens at all until Pittsburgh would be eliminated from the playoffs, where there's literally nothing to play for. I think this team will kick and scream and go down with the ship if the season is not off to a great start, and they're not going to turn to a young guy until the season is mathematically over.
Okay.
And that's if it happens, which in
Right.
Pittsburgh, the Tomlin era, one game where they didn't play a game that mattered. So, for all we know, in all likelihood, the whole season will matter.
All right. The only real mystery here at this point is the cross T's and the dotted I's of how this Aaron Rodgers contract ends up being set up. Will it be a low base salary, sort of like last year, where it was like what, 3 million and something, and then the signing bonus was like 10 million, and then that ended up being the guarantee amount? Will they structure it? I don't know. Say, I mean, people are already talking like it's what, 22 million guaranteed. So there's not too many ways to structure it. Other than that, I guess what I'm getting at is will there be the huge signing bonus within there for the fact with a lower base salary, for the fact that if they do get out, let's say for some reason this goes off the rails bad and they're around trade deadline time and they're out of it, could they get in a situation where Aaron says, I want to go somewhere else to with another team? Will you cut me, get me out of here? And then maybe the contract being subject to offsets where the Steelers can reclaim some of that money if Aaron Rodgers, earns more than, the base salary, yada, yada, that he was scheduled to earn in Pittsburgh.
We want to see the exact incentive structure and package. It may be
Right.
the same thing as last year, which I think was making the playoffs and then bonuses for winning playoff games step by step. It'll probably be the same, but we do want to see. I think Albert Breer typically is good about providing that at some point.
Do you think that, I mean, is there potential of this thing going off the rails and then it getting to a point where Aaron maybe knowing that this is his last season, not wanting to play out a stretch of 5 or 6 meaningless games where he says, "Hey, it's probably in the interest of both of us to part ways here to let you guys go with one of these younger quarterbacks to get a look at them, and then X team has had this injury, they're still in the playoff hunt here. I want to go the Joe Flacco route or whatever, you know."
I mean, there's a million variables there. That thought is not even close to my mind here in mid-May. I think about his 2024 season with the Jets. He went down with that ship on that sinking boat the whole way through in that miserable season, and it started every game, and he never tapped out. He's a competitor, so I wouldn't expect that. But you never know what happens, and what that. There's so many particulars that would have to be known to answer that question come October, November. I know that's something I'm sure Mike Florio will lap up if the time comes, but it's not really a thought in my head right now. I'm sure not a thought as he enters the facility today.
All right. So even though it's being reported 22 million guaranteed and make up to 25 million with incentives, I just caution that sometimes this stuff gets put out here that's not actually what it ends up being. There's no reason to think that it won't be as it's been reported so far, but until we actually see it on the paper, and we will certainly pass that along as soon as that comes out, which you would imagine would be fairly quick, being as how he sounds like he's signing that contract today.
Just to answer the question, even though it's sort of been answered throughout the offseason,
I
for
guess
those.
the other thing too is even though this team shies away from void years
Mhm.
and other than the COVID years and all like that, I mean, might they consider throwing on some void years here to save the cap money and kick it down the road, so maybe they don't have to restructure a contract later on this offseason. Those are other kind of semantics that are at least open up the plausibility to,
Mhm.
especially since, I mean, we already had kind of factored in Aaron Rodgers at the 15 million mark since the tender was put on him, and then now if you're telling me that he's going to impact the cap by at least 22 million instead of a little more than 15. I mean, that's $7 million in additional potential cap space that you're going to have to afford here for him. So how will they go about doing that is one of the, I don't want to say mystery, because we all know how the sausage is made from here on out. You're going to have to afford it somehow, some way against the cap. And will it be via void years, or will it be, a restructure of another player or two as the offseason moves forward?
Yeah, it's a fair question. We know that Pittsburgh typically hasn't done it, but I think there's certainly value and merit to doing it with an increase in cap that'll go up 20%, probably plus next year. So I'd be in favor of it, but we'll see what Pittsburgh does. But to go back to what I was saying, to answer the question, just for those wondering, why is Pittsburgh running it back with Aaron Rodgers? Why did they wait 4 months for Rodgers to decide to bring this guy back for presumably one final run?
Because in their eyes, they think he gives them the best chance to compete. And you go back to what Art Rooney II said several weeks or months ago. I don't know how long it's been at this point. He says, why wouldn't you want to try to compete every year?
Yeah.
So uh, at its core, do I think that they honestly think that they can compete for a Super Bowl championship this year? No.
No, I think they do.
I
What right or wrong, I think that's their mindset. I
Okay.
believe otherwise they would not be making these moves.
All right. Maybe they do. Maybe in their world they think it all lines up. I just can't help but keep going back to Justin net yards per passing attempt numbers and older quarterbacks, and things that I've pointed out in the past, and how quarterback position is such a key position if you're going to win in the NFL. And I for the life of me can't come up with a scenario where Aaron Rodgers you know, provides you what you need, at least from that statistic and that statistic only, giving you a solid chance to compete.
Yeah, I'm not saying they're right. I don't consider Pittsburgh Super Bowl contenders, but I think they think that they can they have a team that can win the division again, can win a playoff game. If you're one of those Final Four teams, then who knows? You're one of the Final Four, and you got 25% odds on math alone to get to the Super Bowl. So I think that's their calculation. But I think your point is correct, and that's my thought as well. That Pittsburgh still wants to win now to maximize the window of the defense of Hayward, of Watt. It's the Rooney mindset of we want to win now. It's why you hire Mike McCarthy. You're not doing that for this long 20-year plan. You're doing it to win right now, and they believe Rodgers gives them the best chance to win right now. Right or wrong, that's the mentality. And frankly, it's hard to find a quarterback this offseason who would have been available that would have given Pittsburgh a better chance to do that just for the short term. Now, you may sit there and say that there's a longer term view that Pittsburgh should take, and that trying to squeeze every ounce out of this year is not worth it. Sacrifice long term. There are fair and nuanced and good discussions to be had. But I think that that's still probably a fair calculation to reunite with him with McCarthy. Malik Willis would have been great. I was a big fan of Malik Willis, but the contract, more money, kind of felt like he was going to go to Miami because of the Green Bay connections there with Halfley and John Eric Sullivan. So, him aside, there really weren't a lot of other quarterbacks to entertain that would have given you a better chance to win for the here and now.
Right. Look, I mean, you would have had to pay him more than the $45 million total guaranteed, fully guaranteed. Let's see, what was it? Yeah, fully guaranteed $45 million for Willis. So if you wanted to go down that road with a really inexperienced quarterback with not a lot of good tape out there, and since he's been in the league, it would have cost you more than $45 million fully guaranteed to even take a look at him. To basically get the opportunity to get more tape on him, right? Once again,
You
if
probably
we
would have had to pay more because Florida, no
right,
state income tax, and
right.
you had really kind of gone over the top to probably pull Willis away.
And the only other kind of more logical way to have maybe have gone would have been to potentially trade for Mac Jones from the 49ers, I guess, is the only kind of logical, maybe impactful way that you could have gone there. But outside of those two guys, and I realize I'm squinting a little bit to even make that an option because you'd have to trade for him, and you just don't push the button and say he's ours like you do in Madden. It would have given up some probably some future draft capital and all like that, and so. But long story short, I mean, there weren't many options out here anyway, and Aaron Rodgers was the most logical option for this team, to compete with a starting with when it came to a starting caliber quarterback for 2026. So we're rolling backwards of actually how things went here. I mean, is anybody listening to this really surprised at the way this thing's turned out? And the short answer should be no, contract and all.
Yeah, the contract's a little higher than what we thought, but in terms of the end result, which is all that matters, is who's your quarterback, Aaron Rodgers. No, that's not a surprise. And I will say, I think even if you hate the idea of Rodgers returning, I think one nice thing out of all this is you have the same quarterback starting for you in back-to-back years, which has not happened in the post-Ben era. And even though it's a new offense, obviously Rodgers knows the system really well. Just to have some level of continuity, like it's been no surprise to me that Pittsburgh has treaded water and been stagnant and spinning their wheels when they've had a different week one quarterback every single year, from Ben his final year to Trubisky to Pickett to Justin Fields / Russell Wilson to Rodgers last year. You finally have something to build off of. So receivers are now familiar with their quarterback. They're not starting new in terms of how the quarterback reads and processes, and getting on the same page and building chemistry. You have some of that built in if you're a DK Metcalf, if you're a Pat Frymuth, if you're a Jalen Warren out of the backfield, etc. And so that is at least something to hang your hat on. I know that this is not a long-term play, and a new quarterback will likely be the quarterback in 2027, but there's something to be said about having the same leader in back-to-back years, what Pittsburgh has been missing, since Ben retired.
I think the biggest pushback when it comes to Aaron Rodgers returning this year, and knowing that it's unlikely to be at best more than maybe one playoff win overall is the fact that what does this do to the timeline of this team actually getting closer to a franchise quarterback, to a time where we're back to talking about Pittsburgh Steelers entering this time of off season with the Super Bowl window being open. And to to me and to most fans, this just seems like checking another year off of the calendar without knowing when the next Super Bowl window is actually going to open again, and not being able to even the likelihood of not even be able to look earnestly at any of these young quarterbacks that you have on the roster in 2026, and then going into next offseason saying, all right. Will they stick with Aller and Howard and maybe finally give those guys a chance, being as how they've watched Aaron Rodgers for a limited amount of time? Will they go in and draft a quarterback in some way, shape, or form in the first round of the 2027 draft? And then how long will they wait to get that quarterback on the field to go through his growing pains and then give him the necessary 20 something games to find out who he is and who he isn't at this point? It feels like, older people like me is, oh, do I have
Okay, Dave.
do,
Do you have
do,
enough time?
do I have enough time?
The sands in the hourglass are running thin. I understand. Yeah, it's a very valid point, and it's a fair question to ask. And that seems reasonable that we're going to exit 2026 and enter 27 with those questions of, will Pittsburgh stick with Howard and Aller, or will they look towards the shiny quarterback in the draft? And we don't know where that's going to go, but that's probably where the conversation will begin. Come January, February, which isn't all that far away. So I understand that thought, and I could agree with a lot of it, but I think Pittsburgh, they want to win now. It's why you retain TJ Watt, you trade for Michael Pittman, all those moves, and that's their mindset, for better or for worse. It's always been their mentality. The team that's not had a losing season since 2003. They're always in win now, let's compete, let's maximize the window today mode. And yeah, they still brought in some youth this year with 10 draft picks, which was obviously good. And they believe that Howard and Aller can learn plenty from Aaron Rodgers and make them better quarterbacks. So that's the calculation. I think about Rodgers. He's a bridge quarterback in a city of them. Bridges are supposed to lead you somewhere, and where is Rodgers leading you to is a fair question. But that's the calculation. We expected them to make it, and it's finally here.
Yeah, but we've been putting up these bridges now for several years
No, I
now,
understand. Right.
and now we're waiting to raise the one playoff win banner in Pittsburgh, and then
Right.
celebrating it.
No, I understand. Yeah, I hear you on that. Where were these bridges leading you to? Now, Pittsburgh has tried the franchise quarterback with Pickett, and they missed out there. And they've needed and wanted a quarterback in some of the worst quarterback classes of recent memory. 23, a disaster. 25 wasn't much better. The 26 class, not a whole lot better in terms of giving you first round high octane options. And so hopefully 27 will be better, and hopefully the stars can align, and we'll see what happens.
All right. Anything else to add on? I will leave you with this, a stat that I keep going back to. Only 4 different NFL quarterbacks aged 39 or older have been able to post an offensive adjusted net yards per passing attempt stat of 6.5 or greater on 275 or more pass attempts in a single season. Of those 4 different quarterbacks, Tom Brady did it 5 times, Drew Brees did it 3 times, and Brett Favre and Philip Rivers 1 each. Somebody listening, give me a good reason of why we should expect Aaron Rodgers to have an offensive adjusted net yards per passing attempt number of 6.5 or greater on 275 or more pass attempts in a single 2026 season.
I get it. The case would be that working with McCarthy and a more innovative offense compared to Arthur Smith is going to be better for Rodgers and better for the group, and we'll see if that comes true.
All right. I mean, you got a lot of eggs, obviously, in old man Aaron Rodgers' basket.
All right, Dave, let's talk about some non-Rodgers topics. OTAs beginning today. Believe Pittsburgh just hit the practice field, where now it's just a little after 11 a.m. as we're talking, and believe Pittsburgh's practice runs from 11 to 1 today. So anything else non-quarterback related you're hoping to learn or hear about?
Yeah, back to the offensive line spots here with Ionichor and Jennings Dunker. Who gets the first reps? Who gets the second reps as the weekend progresses? Does that kind of stay the course? Does Ionichor stay only on the right side? What's the word on Fautano right now? How is he used? Will we see some left tackle work for him? Who is if Dunker's not the first team left guard? Are we talking about Hoffman or Spencer Anderson? More than anything, interested to see offensive line pecking order and how that progresses, not only from day one, but even late into what day practice 9 of the OTA. So I think that's one of the bigger things to keep an eye on at this point. What's the participation level, if any, of a guy like Broderick Jones at this point? Is he able to be out there do anything? And then want to hear as much as possible. And look, is it imperative that Aaron Rodgers gets any OTA snaps? Uh, especially these first three practices. I'm less worried about that. I want to hear more about Aller and Will Howard and what they're kind of looking like there. And then flipping over to the defensive side of football, I don't know if we're going to learn all that terribly much, but you obviously have a lot of the new pieces in there and the free agents like Dean and a couple others with
Brisker.
Brisker and all like that. Just what kind of the makeup is there, and then the draft picks obviously is a topic of conversation. You want as many reports on the draft picks as possible moving throughout this process as well too. But I think the primary focus is what direction does it look like this offensive line might be shaken out as, and then how much more can we learn about Will Howard and Aller, especially in these first 3, 4, 5 OTA practices over the next couple of weeks.
I know I prefaced by saying non-quarterback related, but I would like to see Rodgers get some snaps to get chemistry with the new receivers, Pittman, Bernard. I think it's valuable reps right now that, just you can't get back. And you look at Roman Wilson last year, didn't have great chemistry with Rodgers, who missed a lot of the spring work, didn't take any work in the spring. Even when he got to minicamp, he was held out. So get those reps with a young guy like Jerry Bernard and get that process started sooner. But as you said, offensive line, the moving and shaking there is going to be important, even though it may not be cemented, but where are guys initially lining up? Is anybody flipping? Is Fautanu playing both sides? And then defensively, just what wrinkles will Patrick Graham bring? Even though the base structure of the defense sounds like it's going to be pretty much the same, Graham is certainly going to put his stamp on this unit. And so how do the players react to that? Will somebody offer a comment, a TJ Watt, a Peyton Wilson, about some new wrinkle or formation or point of emphasis that Graham has that hasn't been there before? Will there be more creative ways of getting Herbig on the field? We're not going to find out all of those things over just one practice or a couple of days, but can we hear anything about maybe where this team's head is at in terms of some defensive wrinkles for 2026 under this new coaching staff?
And are there going to be any surprise type players unable to participate in these first 3 days due to some sort of injury or minor injury or coming off of surgery or something like that? So that's something to look forward to, especially on these first 3 days as OTAs get underway.
Yeah, just check the box. Is Deshaun Elliott back in full? Is Darnell Washington back in full? It sounds like they will be, but you want to get confirmation on those guys coming off of 2025 injuries.
All right.
All right, Dave, where to from here? Let's stick with some contract talks. We have signing bonus information for 3 of Pittsburgh's 6 undrafted free agents. Pittsburgh's UDFA deals are never that exciting, but what do we have known, Dave?
Yeah, as of right now, it looks like we've got at least 3 of these undrafted free agents signing bonuses in. Kevin Jabity Jr., $30,000 signing bonus. Lake McCree, the tight end out of USC, $25,000 signing bonus and a $25,000 signing bonus for cornerback Devin Boykin out of Indiana. So those are the only three that we have right now, and Jabedi is the leader in the clubhouse at 30,000.
Okay, we suspected that it might be Jabari or McCree or even Boykin would be among the leaders. There weren't many to choose from. One of them is a kicker, and obviously he's not going to get a large signing bonus. But yeah, that all makes sense there. Also, should mention that it appears, I don't know if it's on, is it on the roster officially? Let's see. I just saw a photo. I think Brooke Pryor tweeted out a partial roster. Yeah, it is official now. Caden Weegan has changed his number from that ugly 42. He is now number 10 because Roman Wilson switched from 10 to his college 14. That opened up Weegan to take a much more attractive number in 10. And so he promised that after he initially signed that he would change the number. He'll do that. And he's done that now officially pretty quickly.
All right. No more crooked numbers, right? As you
Yeah.
like to
So
say.
the career is saved. And it's all said a little tongue in cheek there. But that is official because Brooke Pryor tweeted out a roster showing that Aaron Rodgers was officially now on the roster. Ergo, he signed his contract. But it also shows that Weegan is wearing 10. Okay, Dave, anything else to talk about?
No, I think we're now getting ready for obviously these practices to get underway, and the Steelers just officially announced they have
There it
signed
is.
Aaron Rodgers to a 1-year contract. So I would imagine that's not any void years within there, being as how they're officially calling it a 1-year contract. So we'll wait to see how that contract's laid out and what the cap charge ends up being there. So it's officially official. Not that it wasn't already before the morning and all.
Mm-hmm. All right.
Anything else? I don't think we've got anything else to really talk about. We look, it will be interesting. We'll talk about this more on Wednesday as well too. Maybe we'll have the Aaron Rodgers contract details and the cap impact and all. And if indeed this team, look, at this point, Jalen Ramsey, it feels like this team's going to take that option bonus with him and prorate that out later on in the offseason here. His cap hit currently already assumes that that's going to be what happens here. If this team ends up needing more cap space to accommodate, the extra money given to Aaron Rodgers here. You got several candidates for restructures. Pat Fryermuth, you could go to him. You could go to DK Metcalf. Alex Highsmith would be probably an option for this. I would hate to think at this late in couple of years now clicking off on TJ Watt and him being older, you would think that maybe they wouldn't touch the TJ Watt contract for a restructure, but at a minimum, he belongs in the conversation of a potential restructure candidate there. I think Highsmith, you could free up around 6.6 million. DK Metcalf, if you did a full extension, 17.75 million. TJ Watt, 20.4 million, and Fryermuth, slightly over 5 million to be saved. They're part of a restructure. You know, they still should be fine and not have to do any restructures right out of the chute here. You still got what's going to happen potentially with Joey Porter Jr. as the offseason goes on and how much his cap number will be impacted should he end up signing an extension, which we wouldn't think would be until later in the offseason there. But at the very minimum, I think we need to start thinking ahead of the impact that the Aaron Rodgers contract could have on or likely have on the cap situation, and if indeed that will result in this team having to restructure a contract or two the closer they get to the start of the regular season.
Sorry, I've just lost my train of thought there as I was looking over some work stuff here. Yeah, I think the most likely restructure candidate still DK Metcalf, just the size of the contract, his age, the long-term vision with him. Would make a lot of sense to restructure his deal.
All right.
All right, Dave, any reader emails to close out today's show?
Not many, I don't suppose. Let's see what we do have in here real quick.
And no live stream tonight, just part of our normal schedule. So we'll be back on next Monday.
All right,
actually, maybe not Memorial Day, but we'll let you know.
Let's take one from Ron here. Ron writes in, Dave and Alex, forgive me for my lack of enthusiasm for this upcoming season. The Rodgers signing all but guarantees the Steelers will be a mid-level, one-and-done playoff team once again in 2027. The McCarthy hiring was widely viewed as a sign that the Steelers were finally working to develop the next franchise quarterback, whether that be Aller or Howard. Instead, they signed a 42-year-old quarterback with diminishing skills for the same salary that would have landed Malik Willis. Now, I wasn't a huge fan of Willis, but if McCarthy really was some sort of quarterback whisperer, then why waste your time with signing Rodgers? If he's as good of a coach as advertised, the Steelers could win 7 to 10 games with Howard, Aller, or even Mason Rudolph. This seems like a wasted season and a wasted opportunity to get your young guys some real in-season experience. Enjoy your day, Ron writes in. Look, Ron, I feel you. I feel what Ron's getting after. I feel why he has the lack of enthusiasm for this upcoming season.
Yeah, I get it too. I mean, we had both said, when push came to shove, we would prefer Rodgers not to return. It's not because I think Rodgers is totally incapable of a quarterback or not a good mentor. I thought he played reasonably well last year, surpassed expectations, that he was a really good mentor and certainly brings value to this team. But I think you were looking to move on and try to find something else that would get you, potential options or at least information for 2027. So I understand the thought. I think it's valid to feel unenthused about Rodgers' return, but I do know that Pittsburgh wants to win now. Rodgers does offer that, and if he's able to get this team on a run to another division title like last year, then it'll at least feel good in the moment.
All right. Anthony Hotujek writes in, and thanks for the phonetic pronunciation there, Anthony. As always, I recognize the name there. Thanks for all the offseason coverage. I've been really enjoying the draft/player evaluation discussions. I was looking back through recent Steelers drafts and noticed something I haven't really heard brought up much. Jeremy Bernard at 47 is technically the highest drafted wide receiver the Steelers have taken since Santonio Holmes in 2006. I know it's somewhat semantic since the Steelers have still taken plenty of day two receivers over the years, Claypool at 49, Pickens at 52, etc. But I still found it interesting that Bernard technically becomes the highest selection in almost 20 years, even if only by a couple of spots. He says, what really stood out to me, though, is that some early McCarthy era wrinkles may already be starting to show. This offseason alone, they traded for Pittman, were heavily connected to Mekhi Lemon in round one, and then still took Bernard at 47. It's not some massive philosophical shift yet, but it does feel like this group may be a little more willing to aggressively invest in the wide receiver room than prior Steelers regimes. Could mean nothing long term, but I thought it was an interesting offseason discussion point. All right, so his main and it's an interesting kind of viewpoint he has. Jeremy Bernard is technically the highest drafted wide receiver, at least in overall pick number, since Santonio Holmes. I guess we went into this offseason thinking that this team was going to draft a wide receiver in round one or round two, right? And they traded up obviously to get to the spot that they were at with Bernard.
Yeah, it's a fun draft stat of the weird, and we know that Pittsburgh has the longest drought in terms of not drafting a round one receiver, a mark that was held by Green Bay for all those years until last year I think it was with Matthew Golden. And so interesting now that Pittsburgh is in that position with Mike McCarthy was part of that drought for so long. So yeah, it's a fun little nugget there. Ultimately, all that matters is getting the pick right and getting them on the field. And can Pittsburgh beat man coverage this year is kind of my big thought with these receivers, with Bernard and with Pittman. So it's an interesting note, but ultimately just focused on getting the right player no matter what overall he was, 47, 53, 62, just get a good player.
All right, he's got a bonus question in here if we have time. All right, this will be the last email, only one I think we have in here. Would you guys be shocked if Roman Wilson starts week 1 as the team slot receiver. He says, I know Rodgers doesn't love his rookies as much, but Bernard does seem like a quarterback-friendly wide receiver with strong hands and smart play that could win over Rodgers. So, yeah, I think right now I'd be a little bit shocked if everybody stays healthy and all. I'll be shocked if Roman Wilson rolls out there week 1 as a team slot receiver. I would hope that Bernard's able to at least show enough and earn enough trust. And look, Roman Wilson wasn't, I'm not saying that Roman Wilson wasn't was left off of Aaron Rodgers' Christmas card list last year, but seemed like Aaron, well, had his differences, or at least wasn't able to connect or get on the same page with Roman
Mhm.
Wilson for a lot of last year. So Roman definitely has a lot to prove and to do this offseason just to stick on the roster overall. Obviously, Bernard's the new kid in town, so I guess if the short question is would I be shocked if Roman Wilson starts week 1 as a team slot receiver, and if I'm to assume everybody's healthy and ready to go, yeah, I would be shocked.
I'd be surprised. I think Bernard has certainly the inside track, just being drafted by this new regime and kind of ready-made type of receiver, experienced, professional. They called him Uncle Germ in that Alabama locker room, so a guy that I could see picking things up pretty quickly, but he'll have to still earn his keep. Yeah, I don't think that. I think Rogers likes Roman. I think that he's a good kid and he's working hard and trying, but they just weren't on the same page as you said. A young guy that hadn't just didn't have some of the experience in making decisions on the fly that Rodgers prefers. So Bernard will have to show that too, and have to be able to get on the same page as well. But I think Bernard will be the number 3 to open up the year.
All right, I do as well. All right, I guess what the hell would we have talked about of Aaron Rodgers? I guess we
Well,
would have
OTAs,
talked,
yeah, there's OTAs,
yeah,
and
OTAs.
we used to
A-
have talked about Rodgers if he not
sure,
being at OTAs.
sure. At this point, let me ask the listeners. Wh- how and what and when? How do you want us talking about this team moving forward, specifically when it comes to the quarterback? Do you want us lamenting about the fact that you know, Aaron, the decision with Aaron and why it's good or bad. I mean, we should move on past that point right now. That's why at the top of the show, the fact of the matter here at this point is regardless of how any of us felt up until this point about whether or not Aaron should be back and the price that he should be back at and when officially that was going to happen. Here's where we're at, folks. I mean, it's the start of OTAs, and Aaron Rodgers is in the building and signed at this point now. And isn't that all that matters? At least we're not talking about going past the start of OTAs and Aaron. I assume there will be a lot of talk on, well, why didn't Aaron partake in the first 3 practices if indeed that winds up being the case? I just get, just wondering how do people want us, what should the discussion points be moving forward with this quarterback room now so that we don't become these, you know, talk, you know, talking head type hosts that keep lamenting the fact and the decision and is it right or wrong when it comes to Aaron Rodgers. Whatever we say at this point is not going to change the fact that Aaron Rodgers is going to be the starting quarterback of this team. We've kind of known this for quite a while now. So I guess I'm just wanting to know what direction the listeners want us to go in when it comes to talk about the quarterback position moving forward.
Yeah, some of it's inescapable, and at least now there's a story to talk about and not just speculation of what could happen and might happen and we think will happen. At least it's official and now literally official with the team just sharing the news. But if you're out of the, talking out of the Rogers talk, I think our site is giving people a lot of other things to read about and listen about. I just read about the quirky history of Steelers kickers, about Gene Mingo and Roy Jarella and just Booth Lustig and all those guys
Trout?
and stuff
Did,
like that.
did you hit Trout?
No, I didn't do David Trout.
Okay.
And that would have been a good one though. That would have been
Uh,
a fun one to include on that list. And so we write about FCS linebackers and we write about you do your salary cap deep dives and all. So we try to cater to people who want to read about anything other than Aaron Rodgers, but he is the quarterback. He is one of the greatest quarterbacks of all time. You're going to have to talk about him to some degree, and obviously today was an important day to discuss that.
All right. What are we expecting? Let's see. As far as OTAs, the rest of this week, it looks like Alex Highsmith, Troy Fautano, Michael Pittman, and Peyton Wilson will be available to the media later on this afternoon after practice. So we'll be listening for those interviews. I imagine we will be talking about what they have to say on Wednesday. On Tuesday, I don't think the practice is open to the media, but expected to hear from Patrick Graham, Brian Angelico, and Danny Crossman are scheduled to talk to the media on Tuesday afternoon. So that'll be some nuggets to come out of that. And then on Wednesday, it sounds like that will be when we hear from the players coming off of the field after practice. And then Mike McCarthy will be available coming off the field following that practice. And then no media availability on Thursday, and then no team activities on Friday. So sounds like 2 days of media availability on Monday and Wednesday for OTAs, and then several, obviously, interviews mixed in up until Thursday there. So we ought to have plenty to talk about on Wednesday, and we will do so come that time. So in the meantime, follow me on Twitter at Steelers Depot. Follow Alex at Alex_Kozora. Follow the show at Terrible Podcast. Email the show, theterriblepodcast@gmail.com. If you like what we do and want to donate, SteelersDepot.com. Hit the donate button. Also, if you like an ad-free version of the site, SteelersDepot.com. Hit the ad-free button and follow the directions that way. So, until Wednesday, as always, thanks for listening to the Terrible Podcast with Dave and Alex.